The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources says there are at least 63 frac sand mines and 37 processing facilities in Wisconsin. It's big business in this state and not without controversy. We will hear some of the pros and cons of the frac sand mining boom in Wisconsin, and we hope you will join in with your questions or concerns. Good morning, I'm Joy Cardin. This is the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio. It is 8 minutes past 7 o'clock on this Tuesday, July 31st. We were prompted to do this hour today because of continued listener suggestions and because of a report out last week on how big the frac sand mining industry is getting in Wisconsin. We also saw a state senator who wrote an op-ed piece urging caution and urging the state to slow down. We will hear from State Senator Kathleen Vinehout coming up after 7:30. But first, we will hear from a UW-Eau Claire geologist about this practice called frac sand mining. We'll find out why it is booming in the Midwest and here in Wisconsin, and why he says with responsible frac sand mining, the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. So what are your thoughts? What are your questions? 1-800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. You can also post on the Joy Cardin Show Facebook page. Kent Severson is a professor of geology and chair of the geology department at UW-Eau Claire. He joins us by telephone. Good morning.
Good morning, Joy.
So we noticed that you had written an op-ed piece that had appeared earlier this year in the La Crosse Tribune, and the headline of that op-ed piece was that benefits of sand mining outweigh negatives. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Yeah. Why do you say the benefits outweigh negatives?
The reason I say the benefits outweigh the negatives is because the type of mining is less invasive than other types of mining that are out there, and also the types of jobs that are being produced are really important in these areas. So, for example, in the geology department at UW-Eau Claire, we have about 9 recent graduates now who are working in frac sand, and they're starting at between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. These mining operations are quite high tech. They require engineers. They require public safety officials or the public health. They also require truckers. They require electricians, plumbers, etc., in order to keep the operation going. So I've personally seen a big impact with regard to the employment. Mm-hmm. That's not to say there aren't negatives, because in that op-ed piece I did mention that everything has an impact, and that's my bias. If you name any industry, I'll tell you the impacts associated with it.
Well, we do hear from a lot of, especially residents who live around some of these operations. They're concerned.
Absolutely.
For example, of the sand dust that's in the air. They think this is going to negatively impact their health, and they say there isn't a lot of studies out there about this.
In my opinion, the concern about the dust is not as critical as the traffic. But as far as dust goes, there's no question that crystalline silica dust is an unhealthy thing. However, most people are talking about the threat of public silicosis, and silicosis is an occupational hazard. And there's no question that sand companies have to be very concerned about the health and welfare of their workers, because they can be exposed to high levels of crystalline silica dust over extended periods of time, and that can lead to silicosis. There are not studies showing people getting silicosis from non-occupational sorts of situations. So it seems to me the bigger issue is that of traffic, and there's no question that truck traffic is one major negative impact of frac sand mining.
Because it makes life less quiet in your and maybe more dangerous in your community.
Absolutely, and it impacts roads. It's just less pleasant if you have more traffic on your roads.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are groups that also say that they don't think the DNR has enough people to really be keeping an eye on all of these frac sand mining companies, and that they don't have the personnel, they can't really police what's going on, and therefore there ought to be a moratorium on frac sand mining in Wisconsin. What do you say to that?
I say there's probably some truth to the fact that DNR is understaffed, but the solution to that is not to shut down industry. The solution there is to get the state government engaged, and if we're going to have environmental regulations, we need to have DNR employees who are supervising those and making sure those rules are enforced. So, unfortunately, the state of Wisconsin has been in kind of shutdown mode or in dramatic contraction mode, and I suspect the state government will need to hire new people in order to come on board, in order to supervise this industry.
Yeah, well, given that we don't have much money in the budget for that sort of thing right now, what would be wrong with slowing down, stopping the process, granting all these new permits until we have the people to supervise?
The problem with that is that we also need new jobs in the state of Wisconsin, or else we'll never get the money in the state coffers to hire DNR people or to support the university or to pay other bills that the state needs to pay. We need jobs in the state of Wisconsin.
I meant to ask you, why is it that this is such a booming industry in Wisconsin? Why here? Why our sand?
Wisconsin is ideally situated with the round, almost perfectly spherical, extremely strong sand grains that industry wants in order to enhance oil and natural gas recovery at the oil fields. In southwestern Wisconsin, just western Wisconsin in general, these sand grains are also not buried by a lot of material. So the material is relatively easily mined compared to other areas. Also, we have quite good rail infrastructure in western Wisconsin, and typically the limiting factor on sand mining is not the material itself, but it is the issue of getting the sand to a rail hub or potentially a barge hub where you can then transport the material in a cost-effective manner to the markets. So all of these different things kind of work together to make Wisconsin sand very high quality. And these sands were deposited about 500 million years ago in ancient oceans where the waves came in and out and rounded them, and reworked older material as well to make it almost pure quartz, and that's also what these companies want. So there's many different variables, but Wisconsin is ideally suited or situated for the mining of frac sand.
And how is this frac sand used? It's used in this fracking process for natural gas.
That is correct. This process of fracking, which has been in the news a lot, and by the way, President Obama, he was bragging about the fracking process in his State of the Union address when he mentioned shale gas. But this sand is injected into a petroleum well under extremely high pressures with fluids, sand, water. They send this down the hole under very high pressure, so high pressures that they break the rock apart to form fractures or cracks, if you will. The fluid and sand go into those fractures, and then when they depressurize the hole, you can think of the roofs of these fractures wanting to collapse, but the sand grains, individual sand grains, act as pillars to keep the fractures open. Those small fractures then allow oil and natural gas to move more easily into the well. So this is a way of getting more petroleum and natural gas out of the ground. And it is this process that recently caused North Dakota to overtake Alaska in petroleum production. So it's been a major technique. This in conjunction with something called directional drilling, where oil companies can drill down vertically, and then when they get to their target zone, they can turn the drill bit and they can drill horizontally into the area where they want to get oil or natural gas.
Our guest is Kent Severson, professor of geology, chair of the geology department at UW-Eau Claire, talking with us about frac sand mining in Wisconsin, and we're welcoming your thoughts and questions for him. Professor Severson says the benefits of sand mining in Wisconsin outweigh the negatives, the benefits being employment, economic development in the state, which he says is sorely needed. And we wonder what you think, what questions you have, 1-800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. You can also post on the Joy Cardin Show Facebook page. Checking the weather forecast for today, it's going to be mostly sunny and warm, highs today between 78 and 88 degrees. This is the Ideas Network. There is a boom going on with frac sand mining in the state, and we are talking with our first guest about why that is and why he supports responsible frac sand mining. We will hear from Kathleen Weinhaut, who is a Democratic state senator from Alma, who is hearing a lot of concerns from her constituents in western Wisconsin. And she says maybe it's time to slow down this boom until we know more. And we will talk with her coming up after 7:30. You know, we have lots of callers, Professor Severson, but we talked a little bit about health effects of the sand mining in Wisconsin, a little bit about the traffic and that kind of impact. What about just what this does to our landscape? Are we going to? I mean, what does it do environmentally in terms of our landscape? It looks like a lot of moon craters all over the place, doesn't it?
Well, I guess I would disagree with that. When the mining is going on, there's no question that it's not as pretty as the fields of corn or the forests that might have been there before. You see a yellow or white gash in the landscape. Typically, a mine will have about 25 to 30 acres open at any one time. So it's not like in northern Minnesota, where I'm from, where you have a huge open pit mine like the iron ore mines up there. Mm-hmm. These are quite small compared to that. Also, the companies have economic incentive to reclaim as they go. So once they mine out an area, it will then be reclaimed to a maximum of a 3-to-1 slope. It will then be seeded or planted with whatever was required in the reclamation plan. And certainly the elevations will be lower than they used to be. The hills won't be as high. Typically there will still be hills present, however. And once trees or crops start to grow on that area, grasslands, I think it would be difficult for somebody who didn't know exactly what the land looked like before to actually know that a mine was there. So I definitely, it doesn't look good while the mining is going on, not as good as the other things. But reclamation can be done and will be done. It's required to be done.
Ian in Waupaca County is with us. Hello, Ian.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I was wondering what your guest thinks of the June the 8th story in USA Today about the fact that the frac mining can cause earthquakes. I just wondered if you'd heard about that.
Now, that's is that for the sand mining or the fracking process for the natural gas, Professor Severson?
When you in Ohio, there was a highly publicized earthquake that was out there, a very weak earthquake that was actually not caused by the fracking process itself, but it was caused by the injection of wastewater into the ground. And they were pumping this water down into the ground in areas where there were very, very old faults actually associated with the formation of the Appalachian Mountains, and this was causing very small slippage along that fault, earthquakes that were very, very weak. When you do the fracking process itself, that is going to be prying the rock apart, snapping it apart, if you will. And basically an earthquake is whenever you have a snapping event occur, and then basically these sound waves move outward. The types of earthquakes that you're talking about tend to be very, very weak, and that's from a standpoint of danger, that's not one of the things I'm going to lose sleep over.
The earthquakes or the earth trembles that were happening in Clintonville, Wisconsin, was that due in any way to the frac sand mining that's going on in the state?
No.
And we don't know exactly what was going on there?
No, we do not.
All right. Martha in Milwaukee. Hello, Martha.
Good morning, Joy. I just have a quick question about the repercussions that might come up after all is said and done. For instance, you noted that the roads will take a beating with all the trafficking and the trucking. There may be health concerns later down the line. We don't know. Will there be any financial assistance from this whole process to help rebuild our roads should they need it, to help in other ways should anybody need it, due to any negative outcomes from this? Because I do not trust big business. And with the DNR staff being skeletal in Wisconsin, I really believe they should up them along with this business in order to make sure everything is as proper and as great as it could be. And I'll take my response off the air. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the roads go, for example, in Chippewa County, they've been a leader in having the companies sign agreements in order to repair the roads and in some cases upgrade the roads in order to prepare them for taking heavier loads. If the road experiences problems, then that company is paying money in order to repair those roads. You have to understand that if a company trashes the roads and they cannot get their product to the processing plant, that does not benefit the company either. So roads will be adversely impacted, and they are paying money in order to upgrade and upkeep those roads as the process goes. You don't want to wait 30 years before you upgrade or repair the roads or you have a serious issue. With regard to environmental things, if a company just walks away from a mine, they're required to put in money to cover the reclamation work, kind of put it into escrow, if you will. As far as health, public health issues and putting money into escrow for something like that, as far as I'm aware, they don't do something like that. They obviously are responsible for the health of their workers, and that would be just kind of a standard industrial thing where they're responsible for that health. But I'm not aware of any escrow that they put into an account for public health issues.
Let me one more call before our news break. Brad in Fountain, Minnesota. Hi, Brad.
Hi. Say, I just had a quick question because I know down here in southeastern Minnesota we got a lot of frac sand mines that are proposed or running, and various counties have moratoriums on them while they're trying to figure out all their own local issues. But when you'd explain the fracking process, you just mentioned that they pump a liquid in the sand down into the ground. And one of the biggest concerns I have, and it doesn't deal with the mining itself, it's with the oil. Just what is that fluid? I mean, there's the chemicals that they use. From what I've heard, is the EPA or nobody has the right to. I guess it's not public information.
Yeah, we have very little. We have less than a minute, Professor Severson, and this is a little off of our sand mining.
Mm-hmm. There's no question that fracking has impacts. As far as you're right, Joy, there isn't a lot of information about this, but there's water, which is a scarce resource out in places such as North Dakota where they're doing fracking. They also use this process GAR, which is something it is a crop that's produced in India, for example. There's no question there are environmental issues associated with the fracking process, which does not go on in Wisconsin, I might add. But there are environmental issues about taking oil and natural gas out of the ground with or without fracking. And you don't get something for nothing. That's what geologists think.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. Kent Severson is a professor of geology and chair of the geology department at UW-Eau Claire. We will get a different perspective on sand mining in Wisconsin after this news. Well, we just heard from a UW-Eau Claire geologist who says that the benefits of frac sand mining, which is seeing a big boom in Wisconsin these days, outweigh its drawbacks. The benefits, he said, are jobs and economic development. The drawbacks, he says, are increased truck traffic, but drawbacks that he believes are necessary and do not outweigh the benefits of frac sand mining. He also says there's really no evidence of any big environmental problems or health concerns involved with frac sand mining in Wisconsin. We will hear from a state senator now who is hearing a lot of concerns from her constituents about sand mining in Wisconsin, and we will welcome your questions and comments. I'm Joy Cardin. This is the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio. It's coming up on 7:37 now on this Tuesday, July 31st. Our next guest is Kathleen Beinhout, Democratic State Senator from Alma. She recently wrote in the Capital Times about her constituents' concerns about frac sand mining. She joins us by telephone. Good morning.
Good morning, Joy.
So you probably heard what our UW-Eau Claire geologist was saying is that hey, we need the jobs and the economic development from this frac sand mining, and there really aren't any major drawbacks to this.
Well, I think that the benefits may have been overstated, and I think that the risks may have been understated by our previous guest. I do see a lot of drawbacks, and I feel like the state has woefully inadequate in its regulations on sand mines. We in Wisconsin, the state regulates a sand mine, 1,000-acre sand mine, sometimes 350 feet under the ground, like it was an acre gravel pit. I farm, my family and I farm, and I live next door to a couple-acre gravel pit. And even the couple-acre gravel pit has an environmental impact. But what we're talking about is on a scale completely different. And we're not only looking at something that's much, much larger, we're looking at an explosion of these very, very large openings in the ground that are causing as many as 1,000 trucks a day to travel county roads from the mine to the processing facility, because unless the sand is processed, it doesn't have value for frac mining.
Yes, so what would you like to see happen?
Well, I wrote 2 bills and also made a proposal last fall for a comprehensive study of our mining law, our non-metallic or sand mining law. Those two bills would basically begin with the discussion of what we need to do different. The biggest complaint I've gotten in the last year is there's a 1,000-acre sand mine going in my neighborhood, or 500 acres, and I didn't know anything about it. Because some of our zoning laws are archaic, because some of local government doesn't give much of a notice to the local landowners, and because the notices are sometimes printed in very small papers and don't reach all of the local neighbors, many people have had these mines go into their neighborhood, and they didn't know anything about it until after the deal was done. And this is the first complaint of many that I've gotten from constituents. So almost a year ago now, I wrote the first two bills to say, if you're going to move forward on a sand mine, local government has to notify all of the people within a mile of the mine by snail mail, registered mail, within 30 days ahead of time before a public hearing, and that these notices have to be posted both in the local newspaper and in the regional newspaper. And that's the second thing is that all of the sand mines, regardless of how the area is zoned, if it's zoned agriculture and it's a gravel pit is an allowed use, the sand mine itself has to have a conditional use which forces a public hearing. This is very, very simple. It just says people need to know and they need to participate in what's happening in their neighborhood. But even this basic, very elementary language wasn't ever given a public hearing in the legislature. And the idea of a comprehensive analysis of the sand mine legislation was scuttled by the legislative council, the legislators that serve on the legislative council that was dominated by my Republican colleagues.
So some think that there ought to be a moratorium on the development of more sand mines in Wisconsin until we know more, or until the DNR can be staffed well enough to adequately monitor air and water quality and the like. Do you think there ought to be a halt to sand mining in Wisconsin?
I do, and I think that a moratorium in a number of communities has already been passed for that very reason. But the moratoriums right now are piecemeal. They're in some areas and not in other areas that are very close that are seeing an explosion of interest. What we need to do is think through where we're going to be 30, 50, and 70 years down the road, because the decisions that we're making right now are going to affect the neighborhood that our grandchildren are going to live in 70 years from now. And everybody in Wisconsin should take an interest in what's happening in western Wisconsin. This is an extraction industry. It's a boom and bust industry. And when it's over, and it will eventually be over, we're going to lose one of our most valuable assets. And there's absolutely nothing that's coming back to the state in exchange for that asset. And that is the beautiful hills of western Wisconsin. If you've ever been, Joy, to western Wisconsin, we're looking at topography like no other place in the state. When I ran for governor, I got a chance to travel the whole state. But when I come back to the hills of western Wisconsin, in my mind, there's nothing more beautiful than the hills of western Wisconsin. 500-million-year-old sand. That's a long time that those hills have been there. I think we need to think about what's happening. The whole state has an interest in what's happening.
Besides the hills, are you concerned about any other environmental impact or health impact of the frac sand mining?
Yeah, absolutely, and the list is long. My constituents have told me, and I've experienced myself, the dust from the mines, the drawdown of the water table, the traffic that the professor talked about, which is extraordinary. If we're talking about upwards of possibly 70 or 80 mines in Trumpelow County alone, the traffic on those roads, if we're talking about 1,000 trucks a day for one mine, from the mine to the processing plant, the traffic in that county, in just one county, is right now almost inconceivable. I live right down the road from a mine, from a proposed mine. It's probably about 8 miles away from me. And already the traffic that I drive to when I drive around the district is increased exponentially. And we haven't even begun to touch the potential for western Wisconsin. The DOT is scrambling to keep up with the truck routes, trying to think ahead. How do we put the resources into the roads that need to be upgraded? But there are other issues about noise, issues about lights. I call them the sort of good neighbor issues. There have been sand mines in western Wisconsin for 30 years. Some of those sand mines have lived compatibly with their neighbors. They have big earthen berms around them. They have a railroad spur that goes right into them. The neighbors don't see or hear all of the troubles that we're talking about. But it's the intensity. It's the number that has increased so fast that local government isn't able to keep up with the permits. And the state senator, myself, I have a hard time keeping track of all the details of what's happened. And the neighbors don't even know what's happening. So, yeah, I do think we need to slow down.
Yeah, our previous guest did note, as you mentioned, the truck traffic, increased truck traffic, and that definitely was a drawback. But he still said that the benefits outweigh that kind of drawback because western Wisconsin needs these jobs and this economic development. What do you say to that?
I think there is an economic benefit, and it's not just from the truck traffic and the people who work in the mines, although a lot of people of my constituents point out that the people in the parking lot in those mines are from their license plates are from Texas and Arkansas. They're not from Wisconsin. So some of the best paying jobs are not going to local people. But certainly a lot of the truckers are local people. And the local convenience stores benefit when people stop to fill up their tummy and fill up their gas tank. But this comes at a price. I recently met with a number of people from Stockholm that were in the tourism business, and they were trying to stop a transfer facility just to the south of Stockholm. And Stockholm is a very small village right on the shores of Lake Pepin, which is the widest spot in the Mississippi River, sort of nestled in the bluffs of the Mississippi. And their little community attracts a large number of tourists, mostly from the Twin Cities. And they said, if we have truck traffic through our community all the time, first of all, we're not going to see the tourism. And second of all, even if we do continue to have some tourism, some of our businesses are going to close because they're near this transfer facility. And we saw the same thing happen in Maiden Rock, just one village up from Stockholm, up the river, where a bed and breakfast that was right next to a mine ended up going bankrupt. So tourism and sand mining are incompatible land uses. And frankly, farming and tourism and sand mining can be incompatible uses. I'm an organic farmer. I have a difficult time imagining what it would be like to continue to farm next to a sand mine. We have a DNR that doesn't even want to regulate the dust at the edge of the sand mine. So we don't know what's coming off that sand mine. We can see it. We know that there's dust, but the state doesn't want to regulate it.
We are talking with State Senator Kathleen Vinehout. She recently wrote a piece in the Capital Times about her constituents' concerns, her concerns too, about frac sand mining. Frac sand mining is seeing a big boom in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin DNR says there are at least 63 frac sand mines operating in the state, 37 processing facilities, and it doesn't look like there's any sign of it slowing down. We are talking about the drawbacks of this frac sand mining boom and welcoming your thoughts and questions at 1-800-642-1234 or send an email to talk@wpr.org. You can also post on the Joy Cardin Show Facebook page. Do you see this sand mining boom as generally a good thing or a bad thing for Wisconsin? Checking our weather forecast for today. Sunny and warm with highs upper 70s in the north, upper 80s in the south. This is the Ideas Network. I'm Joy Cardin. Coming up after 8 o'clock this morning, it's another edition of On Your Money. Certified financial planner Kevin McKinley will be in, and he'll have answers to your personal finance questions coming up after 8. We are talking about sand mining in Wisconsin, frac sand mining. Our guest is Kathleen Vinehout, Democratic State Senator from Alma. And Dave in Augusta is with us. Hello, Dave.
Good morning. Hi, Kathleen.
Hello, Dave.
I spoke to Joel in your office last week regarding sand mining. 3 quick points is the loss of farmland value and property value within a half-mile, quarter-mile, a full mile, 2 miles of a sand mine site. The property value goes right down on that farm. Number 2 is the water usage. So there's a sand processing plant on the south side of Augusta that they have 3 high-capacity wells. They're pumping out over 700 gallons a minute out of these high-capacity wells that are running 24/7. And then the third thing is the abuse of and the neglect for the Amish community regarding their buggies and their mode of transportation, school kids walking down the road right amongst the sand mines. That's what I'm worried about.
Dave, you may have heard about the story that happened over in Trumpelow County near Blair, where there was a sand mine that had a berm around it that was inadequate, and then with a large rain, there was a washout of that berm, and the water traveled several hundred yards across the street and down the gully and ended up in an Amishman's farm and really did some damage to both his barn and his sheds. So I think that's a real specific example of how the certain sand mines are not being good neighbors, and how the DNR's existing regulation, at least the enforcement of that regulation, it currently is inadequate.
Mm-hmm. Is there a concern that the water table is being affected by this?
Yes, and it's so much of a concern that a large number of residents in a community that's right near the Uniman mine between Toma and Sparta took baseline measurements on their well before this 1,000-acre mine went in between Toma and Sparta, right near Fort McCoy. And the people, when they consulted their lawyers, they were told that they needed that information to be able to later on down the road move towards some type of civil litigation if the drawdown of that water proved so great that they no longer had a place to live.
What about your property values? Are property values going down specifically because of sand mining?
Well, this is a bit of a mixed blessing. For some people, and I'll go back to Uniman Mine right there between Toma and Sparta, there was land that sold in the summer of 2010 for $2,000 an acre. In the summer of 2011, the same 90-some acres sold for something around $24,000 an acre.
Wow.
So for some people that have worked hard all their lives, that knew their farm was going to be their retirement, but never expected to hit this kind of a boom, it's a huge windfall. They're very, very happy. But the neighbors right near them have seen a 30% drop once this 1,000-acre mine went in. And the people that live right across the street in a beautiful development are still building in that development, overlooking what they hoped would be a very long, peaceful, wooded valley, now see a 1,000-acre mine all day, every day, along with all of the traffic. So this is the type of issue that I call a good neighbor issue. Mm-hmm. If the mines are going to continue to exist, and I believe that they will, they have to be good neighbors. And there's definitely a limit, and we are beginning to reach the tipping point where the benefits are no longer outweighing the costs.
John in Richland Center is with us. Hello, John.
Hi. I would like to give up 3 points.
Oh, very briefly, because we're almost out of time. What's your main one?
It's a natural resource. There's jobs and mining.
Yes. And
it's a renewable resource, biofuels. In reforestation, you can put shagbark hickory on there that gives up 24 million BTUs per cord.
Are you suggesting something else, John? Because we're talking about sand mining.
Right. The sand mining is a natural resource.
Well, but what about the sand mining boom that is happening right now in western Wisconsin and the problems that some have with that?
Well, I'm looking at the optimism. There's jobs and mining. There's jobs for the working.
All right, so there are jobs there. I'm not quite sure where John is going, but what about he thinks the jobs are important?
Well, definitely jobs are important, and we need a balanced economy. I have to look at things from the public's perspective, which means I need to balance all interests when I'm representing the district and voting in the Senate. We need jobs. We need economic development, but we also cannot use one industry to run another industry out of business. And when I met with the business leaders in Pepin County, what they were telling me is that their long-range forecasts for their own businesses now are dismal because of the sand mines moving into their area. So we're dramatically changing the use of land from agriculture and tourism to extraction. Is this a decision that we as a state want to make? Do we want western Wisconsin 70 years from now to look like the craters of the moon? A lot of my constituents are saying no, and I'm saying let's step back and take a look at this and think it through and put together adequate legislation that really does seek that balance. I think it can be done. And I think there are a number of Republicans, even in Minnesota, who are saying, we're wondering the same thing. Do we want to keep moving so fast? So this is not necessarily a Republican or Democratic issue, even though I think the current administration here in the Capitol wants to make it a partisan issue. It's not.
Carrie in Augusta. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, good morning. One of the things with the public boards, just so you know, there's a lot of bullying going on by the attorneys of the sand mines. But the point I wanted to make, and Senator Weinhold, thanks for your work on this. I'm one of the constituents who's called your office. I'm wondering if we can't legislate how many sand mines can go up in a certain square mile radius.
A quota of sand mines, Senator Weinhold.
Well, I think every area is different, and I think that the siting of that mine, at least right now, is best kept with the local community who can make a decision. But part of the problem is that the local public officials, as Carrie mentioned, are being bullied by people who are very wealthy and very adept at working through the problems of local government. I, in my few years as senator, have never seen the kind of money that the oil and gas industry has. They can hire absolutely the best people in the world to come and negotiate with a small 3-person board of adjustment that is made up by local people. And in my world, the local people in Alma and Buffalo County are people that are dairy farmers, they're anglers, they make their living either on the river or on the land, and they simply don't have the resources to compete. Even my little county, Buffalo County, doesn't have the resources to begin to balance. And this is where I think the state could provide technical assistance to these people. But as the professor mentioned, the DNR has been cut back, and we have somebody in charge of DNR who believes in development at all costs. I think that's a mistake.
Very briefly, he did say, let's hire more DNR people to supervise these sand mines.
Well, and I would say also take the muzzle off of DNR. Employees have been told that they can't come to the Capitol and testify. When I talk with DNR people privately, they're very afraid to talk with me as a legislator. Why? Something's wrong. And the answer is that there's one thought right now running DNR, and that is jobs. And jobs at all cost. And I don't think that's what the people of Wisconsin want. People of Wisconsin want a balance.
Yeah, we'll leave it there because we're out of time. Thank you very much for being with us. Kathleen Weinhold, Democratic State Senator from Alma. She wrote a piece in the Capital Times about her concerns and her constituents' concerns about sand mining, which is seeing a big boom in the state of Wisconsin, especially in western Wisconsin. In our first half hour, we heard from a professor of geology from UW-Eau Claire who thought that the jobs and economic development benefits of sand mining outweighed its drawbacks. I'm Joy Cardin. This is the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio.